This short video provides an overview of how Virtuoso's codeless test automation platform for functional UI integration and end-to-end testing of browser-based applications can be used within the healthcare industry to be able to test a variety of different portals, whether it's patient management, whether it's things like doctor's appointments or other healthcare-related workflows. So what we have here is an example of how Virtuoso can be used in this case to test. This is a medical CRM, which you can use natural language to literally write. If I see on screen, this site's in Spanish, so it says entra, so be able to log in. I can literally write, click on, and then what I see on the screen, so entra, to be able to write my automated test step. I don't have to predefine this object with keywords or selectors. I just simply write with what I see on the screen to start following through and building out a journey, a test, breaking it down into individual checkpoints. So for example, to go in and look for today's patients, look for the time, and then click on the patient, before then going in and looking at the patient details, which in this case we're going through to update. We're using the natural language to write, in this case, the name in the name field. As we're doing this, Virtuoso is capturing before and after interactions for screenshots, so we see all the testing evidence. But then we could do things like store, in this case, the patient ID into a variable so that we store that value. And then what we can combine is the functional testing with then, in this case, being able to make an API call. So checking the patient details by passing the patient ID across, storing the response, and then we could do an assertion to check that this, let's say, data has been integrated between the medical CRM. It could be a third-party application. In the same test, we could actually move across into different tabs. So we could open, in this case, another website. It could be a front-end portal in a new tab, and then go through and start interacting from that perspective. So whether you build your journeys as more end-to-end tests or run what we call flows to be able to then sequentially run this. So it could be I create my patient record and then I run another test to be able to across and view that from an administration side. The actual experience here, if we jump back into the medical application, in terms of authoring these tests, so we have what we call live authoring. So as you write your test steps, you can see them execute in a live browser window. So we'll see here I've reused the login steps, which will take me through and log me into the application. And then once that is done, then I can come in and as I write my test steps, so let's just call this explore. So it could be look for pacientes historia. Then I could say click on patient test. And then when I click on save, Virtuoso will run that test step, go ahead and interact. And in this case, it's gone and opened the patient record, where in addition to writing my test steps, I could also go ahead and interact with the live browser. So for instance, I could hover over the look at the patient details, click on that button, it writes my test step, runs it so that I can see it's working, collects the screenshots automatically so we can see what was interacted with. And then when I click on done, what Virtuoso is actually doing is automatically building the model of each of these elements. So we're collecting XPaths, class names, and so on, whatever's available for each of those elements. So that when we run this again and again, which you could execute this from pipelines, from plans, but also I'm going to run this manually. We're then looking at test executions and test reports. Tests can be run in parallel. I could be mapping in test data or driving this with API data to run multiple tests at the same time, where we provide full test reports. And for example, here we can see that this test has failed. We could drill into it. We can read what was being tested. Here's an obvious one. There's a bug. What we're doing here in the test reports is I've got the natural language reports. I can see the screenshots for the interactions. But what we also provide are things like the events, so network requests and console logs for every single step. For the test failure, I can see the screenshots to see actually should that have worked. If I think it does, then I should have looked at the root cause analysis to be able to look through and say, get a rendering of the page source at the time the test was run, page network and page console logs, where if I find that actually, I could bring an engineer or a developer in and they determine that there's an issue and they want to replay this, they could actually go in, go to their journey, run it, but then they could put in, let's say, a pause point. So if it broke at this stage, they could pause it there And what we provide is access through the live browser into the dev tools. So they could start looking, let's say, at the network or the console to start getting an idea, actually, are there particular failure points that give them an idea of why this is broken, even being able to then just step through one step at a time so they can play this back without having to manually recreate the bugs and issues. Then finally, to support reducing the maintenance burden of automation, we have what we call self-healing. So as the tests are running, because we are automatically building the model of each of the elements, on every single run, we are looking to say, if we can determine that the element has basically stayed the same, but behind the scenes it could be that XPaths have changed or dynamic IDs, it could be the label has changed. We saw a Spanish medical site. If that could be localized, I could write the tests in Spanish, run it again, though the interface may have changed to English. But then through machine learning algorithms, we determined that so long as it is still the same element, we automatically heal that as the test is running. So you've got speed of authoring with the natural language. You've got the execution, which can be done in parallel and at scale, even across different environments. Then you've got the test reporting with the debugging and the self-healing to be able to give the speed and efficiencies across creating robust automation. So that's a view of how Virtuoso can be used to codelessly test browser-based applications for functional integration and end-to-end testing, even within the healthcare industry.